There we go. Thank you so much. I'm Patty Muldoon, the president, and where do I need to stand? This is good enough. Um, I want to start by thanking Glenn Cote, who's our Zoom tech host, and Bill Thompson, who's in the other room, who's also going to tell me if folks on Zoom have their hand raised and I don't notice. So we've got two tech folks helping us. And for folks who are in the room stuffing their faces, yay, there's a restroom right behind you in the hall there. And if somebody's in there, you can go downstairs and there are more restrooms there. So just FYI. And feel free to get up, move around as you feel like it, get something to drink, come back. We're very not formal, although I have a mic. And when it comes time to questions and things like that, we're going to ask you to not speak until you get the mic so that folks on Zoom can hear you and you can be recorded. So welcome, welcome. I'm again Patty Muldoon, president of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Eastern Massachusetts. There are about 50 funeral consumer alliances around the country. We have one in Western Massachusetts also, and we closely affiliate with them. And they're having their annual meeting tomorrow afternoon that I'm going to zoom in on. And everyone, of course, is welcome to that. If you wanted to find out more about their meeting, go to our joint portal, funerals, plural, funeralsma.org, and you can sign up to say hello to them as well. Meanwhile, we are so happy to have you here with us today. I know a number of people emailed me today going, crisis of some sort, can't be there, which is something that always happens, but we're so happy that you could be here. So thank you for joining us today. I would just say on a personal note that the first time I got involved with the Funeral Consumers Alliance was right here at Friends Meeting at Cambridge was the first time I did. And at that point, they needed a president, and I kind of got forward. So I also want to mention that we will be having a slate of officers being elected today by you, but we would seriously invite other people to consider joining us as a volunteer. We're all volunteers, as a volunteer in whatever capacity. We have a few significant needs that would be so wonderful if we got a little bit of support. So just think about it over the course of the day. The other thing I want to mention is that for folks on Zoom, if you have questions or concerns, please put it in the chat. Your choice, whether you want to make it open to everyone or just send it to us. Is that all right, Glenn? They can send it to everyone?
Yes, you can either send it to the chat box or you can direct message either myself, Glenn Cody, or we have Bill, who is Zoom support. And between the two of us, we'll make sure Patty knows.
Thank you. And maybe we could take that lovely picture of the Weeks Bridge that I took. We could maybe take that off and go gallery or whatever you like, Glenn. And the other thing I want to mention for folks in the room is we have cards, and I'm sure somebody would be happy to pass them around, and pens. So if you have questions, reflections, concerns, we've got cards. We want to get them recorded. So I really appreciate a more active involvement by all of you. Would be so wonderful. So we will do that. And we are also going to be having kind of a raffly thing. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it, but we have some goodies to give away. So even if you're on Zoom, we will mail it to you or hand deliver it, whatever's easier for us. So goodies are here, coming. Food is here. take care of yourselves. Have a good time while we're here. So, oops, those aren't my notes that I thought I had put right aside for me. Hang on a sec. Nope. Okay, I'm winging it. I don't have my notes. So today I want to mention the flow of the day. If we can go to the PowerPoint again and just go over that very quickly. There we go. Okay. I just want to say this picture, which is pretty wild, came from the Institute for Contemporary Art in their watershed. I think that's what it's called. Um, and we've got a death figure, a gun, and another one. Anyway, it was just festive, and I liked it. I thought agenda was boring. So just to explain why we have this crazy picture, all of those things were made out of fabric or paper. So it was called the Procession. Amazing art display and lots of skeletons in the exhibit. So I just picked out one. So we are going to do quick introductions for each other. And I've got some questions for you because we'd like it to be a little more interactive than just coming from the front. And a little quickie from me on what's been going on this year. And then the treasurer budget, hopefully take 2 secs. The slate, we need to approve it because it's an annual meeting. And then we get into the juice of the meeting, which is going to be with Tyler and Berger to your right, who is going to be speaking. And we're very excited to hear her. And then we will have a discussion with her and among each other, and then a quick closing. So, any thoughts on all of that? No, like why would be? It's just an agenda. So wonderful. Thank you. So my questions, I'm going to hold off on my questions for you so I can find my notes. And let me just dive straight into just a few quick reflections from the year. So one of the things that we focused some of our energies on was to advocate at the State House for a bill to expand death care options to include 2 new options that several states have included, but Massachusetts is not very fast to pass any bills. So this bill would allow alkaline hydrolysis, or what is called water cremation, which has become very popular in the states that are allowing it. And I'm not going to explain it, but we can talk later if you want. Or nor natural organic reduction, which is called human composting. And we very much wanted to include those. It did pass out of the first committee, but then it stalled. So unlike the climate bill that seems to be moving forward, this one isn't. So this is the second session that it's been introduced in. And I hope that all of you who are Massachusetts residents will advocate to your representatives and state senators to expand death care options so that we have access to greener death care options. And if you want to talk about those things, bring it up later. We'll get into that. The other thing that's been going on is Sandy from FCA of Western Mass and I regularly attend what we call the M Board, the state licensure board for funeral directors and apprentices. It's a really exciting job to attend their legislative meetings, not legislative, regulatory meetings. But I just want to remind you that we have had some effect with them. There was basically no consumer fact sheet, funeral consumer fact sheet at the state level. We worked with not only with them, but the Mass Association of Funeral Directors, and we jointly agreed upon a consumer fact sheet, which is now on the state website. And you can learn more about that on our website. but it is a step in the right direction. One of the other things that I've learned is how many of our funeral directors are retiring. Like nationwide, it's like 60% within the next few years. In Massachusetts, it's been estimated we have too many funeral homes for the number of deaths, but this is going to change the picture dramatically, making me think that some of us may want to get a little more involved in death care ourselves or do home funerals, take care of it ourselves. Our organization, which is 62 years old, uh, worked years ago, long before I was here, to pass a bill that would allow people to handle their loved ones' bodies themselves. So you don't need a funeral director. Most people use one for the transportation and all, but that is still an option. And it's just a heads up. Funeral directors are having a very hard time finding apprentices, people staying in that line of business, which I will own is a challenging business. You're on call 24/7, and you may have heavy bodies to carry from a third floor down. And so there's some real challenges. I'm not going to say anything about how I feel about the embalming that they often do, but it's a requirement in this state, another issue that should be changed, that in order to be a funeral director, you have to be an embalmer as well. I'm obviously a green burial, green death care focused person, but we have lots more advocacy areas that we can work on. I just wanted you to know that we have been working and we need your help because everybody is a funeral consumer, but we're not usually thinking about it. So if we could get everybody to say, we want this, it would happen. We just need more energy to work on that. So those are just a couple of things. We also just had nationwide what they called a super conference. Let me see if I can name the 4 organizations. First time. The Funeral Consumers Alliance National, the NEDA National End of Life Doula Association, of which I am a member, co-sponsors, the Home Funeral Alliance, and the People's Memorial Association, which is like FCA, but in the state of Washington. 4 of them co-sponsored an event, which I was going to go to, but turned out I couldn't, and I attended on Zoom. Terrible tech problems. Thank God we've got Glenn and Bill here. Oh, they had terrible problems. So yay for this. But it was very exciting to finally have folks coming together on the same page. We all are very closely aligned with each other, and we should be working together. So some really good panels. So I just wanted to say that has happened, and your own FCAEM, we continue to provide support individuals and to the extent we can publicly. Like Sandy and I are about to go down to West Falmouth for the Massachusetts MCOA, Massachusetts Councils on Aging. Everybody else knows it. I only do it every year. We're going to be down there for a couple days, speaking to all of the senior center staff across the state. So that's another, we do public education. If you're interested in doing public education, we could definitely use some more people engaging in these conversations at senior centers. But we do occasionally go out, but our service area is rather huge. And so there's lots of room for more people to help. I think I'm going to stop there with what's going on with FCAEM and invite our treasurer, Claire McNeil, to come forward and share and get us to approve the budget.
Hi. This has been do you have a slide of the budget? Okay. Yes, this has been a year focused on communication, with most of our expenses related to the annual newsletter and our very interesting website. I hope you check it out. When you read our newsletter online on our website, you'll be able to use the links, which are really powerful in many of the articles that we wrote. We are fortunate to have a savings account, enabling us to spend more than our income. It is currently, we have about $19,000 or $20,000. The proposed budget for fiscal 2025 is on the right-hand side of the screen. And for nerds who want to compare, I have pieces of paper you can look at later, or you can look at it quick, but you can see that last year we were over and had to take from savings $1,200. And this next year, we are projecting that we will need to transfer from our savings about $2,500. Last year, we were fairly quiet in going places and doing things, and we hope to do more. Although most of our organization's work is accomplished by unpaid volunteers, we do pay for technical work on the website, as well as all the production of the newsletter. And emailing, yes. Oh, yes, for technical work or whatever, right? So the budget is on the right. We get a lot of donations by checks. Some people go through PayPal, but then of course there's a fee. Membership contribution is requested of $40 each. As we get more members, of course, we'll get some more income of that. And we have 2 people who work on membership and sending out the information that comes when you join. Question?
Let's just make sure that people in the audience, when they have a question, speak into the microphone.
I'm wondering what your overall assessment is of your basic budget for the year, if that's a good year or a bad year.
Was last year, well, because we lost we have a net loss last year that's hiding underneath the script. And I have a copy of it. Maybe I can tell you what it is. The net loss was about $300 because we had already moved in money from the savings. So it's not a perfect thing. It just shows the functionality of the budget. So I entertain a motion to pass the budget, and then we can have some more discussion. Yes.
Some of our expenses that are showing up are for multiple years. So the fact that you see higher numbers for FY25 is because we got some bills from FY22, 23, 24, and we'll get them for 25. So I don't think of it as I thought it was a pretty decent year. We just, they're uneven expenses. You spend a lot in one year, and that's just how it goes. So I don't think it's been a bad year at all.
And because we have the savings, we decided to prioritize our efforts on things other than the fund drive, which we have done before. All right. So I entertain a motion to pass the budget, and then we can have further discussion. So Eva is making a motion to pass the budget. And your name is? Lori. For the diligent Fred Hapgood, who's taking minutes. Are there other questions about the budget? Yes.
I'm coming now.
I just want to say that your communication allocation was fantastic because that's why I'm here.
Good. Yes. Yes. All right. All in favor of passing the budget?
And folks on Zoom?
Any objections on Zoom to passing the budget?
Are there any? Oh, that's right.
Betsy Hewitt has her hand raised. No, she doesn't. Eliza Stratos has her hand raised. Eliza, do you? Oh, I see. It looks like you're putting your hand up and down a couple of times.
Maybe this person has a question.
No objections.
Okay.
Hearing no objections from Zoom.
All right. Very good. Then we declare the budget to be passed. Thank you very much.
Claire, did you want to say something else?
Not at this point.
Thank you. Okay. No. Okay. And if we could go back to the next slide on nominations, and Paula, there she is. Paula Chasin, our membership secretary. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So every year at our annual meeting, we have, which way? Oh, every year at our annual meeting, I can hear it reacting. Okay. We have our opportunity to vote in the board. And the way it works in our organization is that we vote in half the board each year for a 2-year term. And so that leaves us with half a board carried over from the previous year. So this particular year, the slate that we have that we need you to vote on includes Claire McNeil, who you heard, our treasurer. Claire joined the organization, I don't know how many years ago now, but 6 years, I was guessing that, yeah. Claire had been president of FCA back in New Jersey, in New York. And so she had experience, and she was at a meeting as a newcomer to New England, and we were attempting to fill some slots. And she said she volunteered to be the treasurer. Since I was the treasurer, I said, welcome. And so she became our treasurer, and she does a fabulous job keeping track of everything. And, planning and it's just very good to have somebody so solid, keeping records and helping us see what's going on. And the other person, one of the other two people is Ruth Foss, who is here. She's also on the slate. And Ruth has been a member for many years, FCAEM. And Ruth has wonderful artistic talents, as well as her passion for helping people in FCAEM. And for many years had a company which used incredible creativity for homemade caskets and using artisans to make really beautiful caskets out of wood, out of fiber, and just really beautiful creations. And so that's still, you're still have your hand in a little bit, but not in the same way. Not in the same way. So she's here because she has a terrific interest in helping FCEAM. So the other person to be voted on is Frank Singleton, who is not here today, but has been a big support. He's been going to the board meetings that, that Patty described, and very interested in the mechanics of how government functions or doesn't function in support of the interests of people that are in this field. So, so that's our slate, the 3 people that I mentioned. We also have the ongoing members that, including Patty, myself, Eva Mosley, and Fred Hapgood, our wonderful and devoted secretary who's taking notes today. So we have another year of our 2-year terms to get through. So, but today we're voting on the slate. It's the 3 people I mentioned, Claire and Ruth and Frank Singleton. So all in favor of the slate, please raise your hands. And I guess we could have people raising their hands on Zoom as well.
Yes, and if you're on Zoom, it might be easier to, if you Well, please voice your concern now if you object.
Yes, so I would ask if there are any people that have questions or concerns about the slate. We will be glad to respond. Are there any questions? Any no votes?
Holly, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question? No, Holly has lowered her hand, so I think
Okay.
we're good.
Okay, so I guess the slate wins. It looks like unanimously. So thank you all. And there was something else. Oh, yes, we can entertain the nominating committee can entertain other suggestions for the board. If anybody thinks of somebody who they think would be a good person, good candidate for the board, we would just need to know name and so on and what you think their qualifications would be for serving on the board. So thank you, everybody.
I think Claire has something to add.
So because it is essential to have a treasurer all the time, as we're responsible to reporting to the state, I accepted the election. But life moves on, and I think it's time for you to have a new treasurer. It's time to turn the reins over to someone else. I am resigning as the treasurer, effective as soon as possible. If you know of a person who enjoys volunteer work, perhaps with financial experience in another organization, please contact us now using the contact section of our website or talking to Patty, including yourself. Please consider it's a nice opportunity to do something meaningful for a great group of people.
Thank you so much, Claire. You've been absolutely awesome. Yeah, let's give her a hand. And I'm going to also ask for a hand for Paula, who's the person who answers your questions. Often like four of us could answer online, but Paula's the one who follows up one-on-one, and she has so much knowledge. Let's appreciate Paula. Yay! Volunteers are awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're done with that slide. Again, be very interested in hearing if anyone else is interested in moving forward. So I'm going to hold off on my questions I'm just going to do one because we've got some goodies coming up. Leading into Tyla Ann's presentation and discussion, this is Lisa Carlson's book, I Died Laughing. And we're going to give one of these away at the end now. And in there, she says, the Robert Wood Johnson spent $27 million only to learn that medical people were not honoring living wills unless there was an aggressive family member who intervened. So that makes me think that all of our roles are incredibly important as we care for others who are approaching their end stage of life. And that is also something Paula is going to, Tyla Ann is going to speak to. But Lisa Carlson, I heard her speak. She was in a wheelchair. She has since, what shall we say? She has died. She has transitioned. Wonderful human being and an inspiration for all the FCAs. And she was so funny. So she's written a book all about death humor. And so I just thought I'd pick one out. Final Exit, terrific book. The Suicide How-To book, kind of out of date, was a bestseller for 19 weeks after its publication. 1 year later, the paperback version came out and did a brisk business. Who waited for the paperback? And what did the cheapskates do with their savings? So I'm going to give away this book to the first person who raises their hand. There you go, Dari, it's yours. Uh, yeah, those aren't my notes. Those are generic, but thank you. We have some other copies here. We would appreciate a donation of maybe $10 for that. And you too can have death humor. So let us move into Tyla Ann Berger, who is, like myself, very involved in death care, only she's made it her life's work. And she's been amazing. And we are so excited to have her be here. But rather than my actually give her a decent introduction, I'm going to ask Tyla Ann if she would tell us what brought her here before she goes into the serious content. And maybe this part's serious too. Thank you so much, Tyla Ann.
Hello, everyone. Are Zoomers hearing me well?
I nods and thumbs up from Zoomers.
Okay. I'm used to microphones. So my name is Tyla Ann, and I'm hoping that this will be more of a conversation and more of a comfortable conversation between us rather than I'm not going to lecture at you. There's 5 slides on my screen. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking to you. And then what I really want to know is what brought you here and what I can answer for you. Okay. But how did I get here? I'm a 43-year registered nurse. Okay. My first 10, 11, 12 years of nursing were ICU and ER in university medical centers in New York City. I saw a lot of death in the ICU. I saw a lot of death on the floor. I saw a lot of death in the ER. I saw a lot more life. And my first years of nursing, it was all about making sure those people walked out of that building alive. Okay. I remember spending the first 2 years thinking nobody died on my shift. Okay. How misguided was I? Okay. But that's how doctors and nurses all come out of our schools and our training with the understanding that our goal is to save everyone. I got over it. That doesn't mean I wasn't good at the technical work, good at the ICU work, that I participated in saving quite a number of people's lives in my career, and I don't regret that in any way, shape, or form. But what I began to realize after a while is that I was the one in the ICU that got assigned to the people who weren't going to make it because I had figured out how to negotiate the doctors out of the super interventions and those sorts of things. This became a lot clearer to me because a story I'm not going to tell now because it would take way too much time, but if anybody ever wants to know, it was another Quaker who got me into hospice, and not by the usual expectation, but I started in hospice in 1992. So I've been in hospice for 32 years. I have done hospice in the inner city. I have done hospice in very rural communities and in 3 different states. Okay. Started obviously as a hospice staff nurse, became a clinical manager, and for the last 8 years, until I sort of retired in June, have been the director of clinical services for one of the largest hospices in Massachusetts, serving central and eastern Massachusetts. Okay. So I've been working with death to some extent for 32 years, for actually 43 years, but I've also been working with living until death. So is hospice about dying? What do you think? Hospice is about dying, but it's first living until you die. Okay. Our hospice teams have to be exemplary, exceptionally able to handle preparation for death and what happens at the time of death. But the vast majority of time we work with a person and their support system, their circle of care, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, is spent about living the goals that that person and that set of people have until that moment again. What does that mean? So hospice teams tend to focus when you come on service, and the average people don't don't get on hospice early enough. Okay. And then they frequently miss out on the opportunity to have hospice and to be home because they end up dying in the hospital. They end up just one more treatment or one more this or one more that. Okay. But when they do get onto hospice, the average stay on hospice in the United States right now is around 57 to 65 days. Okay. If you ask the average hospice team member how long it takes to really get to know a family or a support system, a person and the people around them to be able to make their goals real, we like to have 3 to 6 weeks to work with them. And if we're only getting 60 days, we're not getting a lot of full length time. Now, there are people who are in hospice for a year, even occasionally 2 years, but there's also a lot of people who are on hospice for 2 days, 7 days, 10 days. And then all we're doing is crisis care and trying to get things as good as they can be for that moment. Okay. And so hospice teams tend to focus on what the FCAA is really focused on in the first days that we are on. Okay. And that can put people off. And sometimes we can't do it because we don't want to alienate a family. But what we want to do is get the funeral decisions made early so that everything is set and we can go back to focusing on living. Okay. What we don't want is for our families to have to make those decisions. And this is an area where if you're concerned about the FCA areas, you're concerned that people make decisions at the last minute. They get pushed into choices. And this is what we want to avoid. So we work with our families a great deal. My areas of expertise, aside from general hospice care, is I am a Quaker. I'm a member of this meeting. Okay. I'm a lifelong Quaker. And in Philadelphia, a group of Quakers created a special needs hospice. And I was the founding executive director of that hospice. It was started by 3 or 4 Quakers who worked for various hospices. We came together, brought a bunch of other Quakers who were concerned into it, and we created a demonstration project hospice that was aimed at the populations that mainstream hospices did not serve. So we created a hospice intentionally to take care of terminally ill people with mental illness who were homeless, unhoused, did not speak English, were in deep ethnic populations, and the intellectually disabled. And we went ahead and we got that hospice licensed by the state. We got it Medicare and Medicaid certified, and we ran it operationally for 4 years with one intention, and that was to show the mainstream hospices in Philadelphia how to do that care for the people they thought were too hard to serve. Okay. And also a secondary was to teach the service organizations that served those people that hospice was not a dumping ground for their population, that it was actually better care. Because a lot of the service organizations thought that their people were pushed into hospice because they weren't getting as good care as everybody else was. When in truth, sometimes the more aggressive care is the poorer care. Okay. We ran that hospice for 4 years and we turned it over to a large VNA who promised to keep the program as operational. In the meantime, we did lectures at hospice associations. We did presentations and educations in the community. And so you got the idea? Okay. All right. Obviously, hospice people care about funeral arrangements. I know a lot of hospice nurses who are green burial advocates, and they work with their families with that as well. Okay. So that's who I am. There is one additional piece of information which colors my understanding. I have known for my entire nursing life the impact of serious and advanced and terminal illness on people and the people around them that surround them, that are their circle of care. And we're going to talk about that for a minute. And I've known that intellectually, and I've known that in terms of assistance. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Patty. And I've known that in a very professional and experienced way. I now understand it emotionally, as I've spent the last 3 years battling pancreatic cancer. So there's nothing like a hospice director with an advanced cancer diagnosis. My staff was wonderful for the last 2.5 years and spectacular. I'm still here. Okay. My disease is not active right now, but could come back. So I have an emotional understanding that I did not have before. And I've spent the last 2.5 years making sure that all of my staff knew everything about my experience, about diagnosis, about fear, about questions, about experiencing, because they could ask me the questions that we can't ask our families about what their experience is like and those sorts of things. So I've made my diagnosis and education process for my hospice staff, and their response has been amazing. So this is not about that. I just want you to understand that my experience comes from multiple factors at this point. So can we put up the PowerPoint? And I'm going to make this as quick as possible. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Just to let you know, I'm sure that you have an idea of this, but when a support system, what I call the circle of care, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute, is impacted by serious or advanced degrees disease, on average, there's a 4-year period of caregiving. That may have been 2 weeks because somebody got a diagnosis in the ER 2 weeks ago and they're going to go home and that's going to be it. Or it may be 6 years or 10 years, but on average, when a support system, a person and their support system is impacted by serious illness, it's on average 4 years of total impact on their life. Okay. Heart disease and cancer make up about 40% of deaths. All the other causes are single digits. Okay. The third most common cause of death for the average person in the United States is accidental death, believe it or not. Okay. The third, the causes in the top 10 list of causes of death: heart disease, cancer, accidental unintentional injury. Would that be what? Falls, absolutely. Falls, motor vehicle, everything. Okay. Fourth, I'm trying to decide whether it's between pulmonary and neurological disease, dementia, basically. And I think dementia has overtaken pulmonary disease. Gun deaths come up, interestingly, both in accidental and also intentional. Intentional murder and suicide are small single digits, though they make up too much of our news these days, but they're in the small single digits and they're not in the top 10. Okay. Hospice utilization rates run from 47 to 52% of deaths, depending on what expert you're talking to. Why is that? And is that an awful number? It looks at the time as an awful number. When I went into hospice in 1992, the utilization rate for hospice was around 21%. Okay. Understanding that accidental death is about 10% of deaths. So those folks aren't going to get in there. People who are diagnosed late, all these sorts of things. So actually, if we can stay over 50%, we're not doing too badly. Could we like it to be more? And almost 2 million people receive hospice care each year in the United States. Okay. And what has just gone right out of my head is the number of deaths per year in the United States. But I think it's something like 4.2 million. But don't quote me on that. Next slide. Okay. This is the most important thing we're going to think about today. And that's the reason why you're here, okay, is that there are people in this world that you care about. Okay. There are people in this world that you care about. They may be family members. They may be friends. They may be neighbors. Okay. They may be colleagues at work. Okay. What hospice teams tend to call the circle of care too often is only defined as family and friends. But in this world that we live in now, the circle of care around an individual facing serious illness may be any one of those people, their colleagues, their friends, their neighbors, as well as family and friends. It is different for every person. Okay. One of the things that hospice team members get really, really good at is finding out who is the circle of care, because what we get on the referrals with the health record is likely to be wrong. It's likely to be right too, but it's likely that there will be missing parts of that circle. So what I mean by the circle is anyone whose interest in care comes into contact with an individual. Okay. They're a member of their religious community who brings a meal is a member of the circle of care for that person. Okay. As well as their spouse, as well as their doctors and the other practitioners and providers, and as well as their hospice team. The circle of care is a very variable, and this looks like one circle. There are concentric layers to the circle. There are the ones who are immediately involved in this person's care and immediate life. And there are the people who support the people who are in that immediate circle. And there are people who do drop-in things and those sorts of things. All of these people are part of the circle of care. They have varying degrees and they also have varying understanding. One of the most interesting questions that we get a lot is from people who pull our staff aside and say, maybe they're a neighbor who just brought something over while the hospice team member was there. And they say, I want to help more. What can I do? And our answer is keep asking, keep trying, keep putting your foot in the door, because it's very hard to see what you want when you're in the middle of information and fear and decision making. It's very hard to make a decision. One of the most common conversations that I had with newer hospice team members is I would say to their manager, why haven't we seen so-and-so for this discipline? Why haven't we seen this family for this discipline? And their answer would come back, well, they said they were too overwhelmed and didn't want us to come visit. And my response every single solitary time is if they are so overwhelmed that they're turning down help, that's where you need to be. Okay, because if you can't figure out how to assist them in receiving help, then they're only going to get worse in terms of their situation and their ability to cope. So keep trying to get a foot in the door. Mm-hmm.
We have a question in the audience.
I'm only asking because so I don't mess up your sequence. How do you do that without imposing?
Okay. Get creative. Okay. And because I get these questions from my family and friends as well when they have people they care about who are in hospice or are passing or are very sick, et cetera. I've told people to put a note on the door that says, I was here. Okay. This is my phone number. I would like to come back and help you. Please call me with anything. I've suggested that people leave things on the doorstep. Okay. I've suggested that people call the spouse or the sister or the whatever and say, I'm here and these are things I have to offer. It's sort of an individual assessment, okay, of how do these people react to things? And yes, it's possible at first to make somebody irritated. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do hospice teams sometimes tick off some of the people we're working with? Okay. And then we figure out how to go back and to continue the conversation. And what I just want to drop this off. That gets you in the door. Okay. I just want to drop this off. My daughter made this card for you. I just wanted to drop it off. Okay. I'm leaving my phone number in the door. Okay. Don't give up and go away. Okay. Now, if somebody tells you, don't do it again, you got to honor that. Okay. But until you get to that point, don't let go. Okay. But always stay that the reason why I'm here is because I care. Okay. I'm here because I care, because you're important to me. And so I'm just dropping this off. Okay. Just put that care message in there somewhere. Okay. Next. Okay. I'm going to go through this very quickly because the experience of hospice teams in the last 5 years are just as much as any other part of the healthcare system. I'm on my third oncologist. Okay. The last two retired. Okay. Ahead of their plan. Okay. I lost a bunch of staff in the pandemic. Everyone's lost staff. Every system is going through financial difficulty because of the impact of the pandemic. The healthcare system is a pretty freaking mess. Okay. Did you hear what Patty said, that Robert Wood Johnson found that the vast majority of practitioners ignore directives, advanced directives, and medical wishes? Okay. Because they're too busy. That's part of it. Part of it is that they were never trained to pay attention. Okay. So back when I was in the ER, nobody looked for advanced directives. Okay. And they don't do it a lot now because everybody is crazy. So you really have to be aggressive. I've had to be aggressive on my care. I've had to teach my patients to be aggressive in getting their questions answered. Even at end stage, there's still questions to be answered. So pandemic recovery is financially impact healthcare institutions, as well as a lot of people have left healthcare and we've not recovered from that. So that's a big issue. Disparities of care is big. Okay. And that's one of the things that Friends Hospice was there to change. Agencies, hospitals, they may be hospices, they may be primary care physicians who think that they either make assumptions that everybody has access to the same information and the same care, the same support, or they think that that person, because of their intellectual disabilities or because of their mental illness, is just too hard to handle and find reasons not to take them onto service or to keep them in their care, is a pretty big issue. And the whole thing of, you're putting me in hospice because I'm a minority, or you're putting me in hospice because you don't want to give me the real care. Okay, is another place where disparities in care, despite everyone's best intention, also happen. Okay. So, and then there's the regulatory environment. Has anyone ever heard of the term SDOH? Yes. Social determinants of health. Okay. So here are hospitals and oncology practices and dialysis systems and hospices who are trying to keep taking care of their people during the pandemic, losing staff right, left, and sideways, and very well-intentioned initiatives in the government regulatory system that were put into place before the pandemic started continue to move through their processes. And so a clinical director trying to figure out where the staffing is going to come from suddenly finds themselves with a deadline that says, you have to give us the following data on social determinants of health from your population, which means rewriting your entire computer health system so that it starts asking questions about what is called social determinants of health. So social determinants of health is all the people coming in, what kind of education did they have? Do they have learning barriers? Can they read their prescriptions? Can they understand their prescriptions? All of that, we all of a sudden have to redesign all of our systems because that process that started a while back and was from good intentions. Okay, we know Friends Hospice certainly knew that social determinants of health were a real factor in terms of our ability in our practice, but realigning our entire medical record system to be able to deliver this data to the government at the same time, and new quality measures, and you have to redo your system for this. So the entire healthcare system, just to let you know, is under massive pressure from all the good intentions and recovering from the pandemic and data gathering and those sorts of things. And this is one of the reasons why we have so much fun in healthcare.
One moment, we just getting you the microphone.
You deal with the problem of there being a belief that if a person goes into hospice, they think that means that everybody else has just given up on them.
That's probably the biggest barrier that hospice teams face, is explaining that it's about quality of life, not about giving up and not about hope. And actually, somewhere between 3 and 10% of hospice patients graduate each year. They get too healthy to stay on hospice. Okay. But the vast majority do pass on hospice. And one of the reasons why we don't send our brand new team members out to admit people is because one of the biggest barriers to admission to hospice is oh my God, they've given up on me. Okay. In my years in the field, 3 times when I went into houses, and you almost always have the first conversation sitting in a living room, rarely at a kitchen, but mostly in a living room. You're sitting with the most important people to that person and that person. And 3 times when I've walked in and sat down and introduced myself, the first words out of that person's mouth was, "So you're what the angel of death looks like." Okay. The first time, it threw me for a loop. Okay. It really threw me for a loop the first time that happened. And there were other variations of that question, et cetera, but I eventually learned to teach my staff to respond to that question is, so what have the doctors told you? Okay, so what do you know and what do you understand? And then be able to explain. So to use that, the response to that as a way to start our assessment and figure out what they did know and what they understood, and that they only found out that they were terminal yesterday. Okay. And it used to be that I estimated for our staff that about 1/3 of our patients discovered that they were terminal, not because they'd been diagnosed as terminal 6 months before or 3 months before, but when either the referral to hospice happened or we walked in the door. In terms of their perception of understanding, okay, about 1/3 of the people that we walked into the home, hospice was the news. And that's something that's wrong in the healthcare training system. That's something that's trying to be addressed. There is an organization called the Massachusetts Serious Illness Coalition that has now been working for a good 10 years and is getting much more active now. And we'll talk on the next slide about what they're most active about right now. And they're trying to teach medical students, teach nurses, teach all of the providers how to have serious illness conversations much earlier in the trajectory, so that it isn't the news that they didn't want to hear when we walk in the door. Okay. All right. So there's 2 more slides. One is, I just want to make sure that you know, this is based on Cicely Saunders was the founder of Modern Hospice. She started St. Christopher's Hospice in London, taught all of the people who started hospices in the US in the 70s and 80s. Okay. And they came up with a picture of total pain. And everyone, when you say pain, everyone thinks of physical, right? Okay. But we have spiritual, social, emotional, and financial. Okay. I have a very good friend who is now retired, but she's a member of a Quaker meeting in Philadelphia. That doesn't really matter, but she was a hospice chaplain for many, many years. And she very quietly, without the knowledge of her agencies, would take phone calls from both hospice families and non-hospice families where there was serious illness involved and people were considering suicide. And she became known as a person to call when you were trying to figure out what to do with that situation in your family. And she got calls from dozens and dozens, probably 100 families in different situations where suicide was being actively considered by somebody, despite there being active support. And mind you, I'm not saying suicide is an absolutely bad thing. Okay. I do support the medical aid in dying. And for those who find themselves in a situation that is untenable to them. But for most people who are considering a suicide, it actually isn't. They haven't actually gotten to that point. They've gotten to a point of desperation instead of an aware and knowledgeable decision. Okay. The folks that Phyllis worked with generally got through that process with assistance and support and reminders to their hospice team and working with a variety of things. But there was one person that she was unable to prevent from committing suicide. And it was not the patient. It was the wife. And what pain was so intolerable that she made the decision to commit suicide. Of all those 5 pains, which one drove her to commit suicide? Financial. She was aware that they had life savings. He had dementia. It was going to be a long, slow process. Okay. She had chronic medical illnesses, which had a high dollar cost. And she believed that if she kept using up their savings with her medical bills, there would be insufficient money when he needed to go for 24-hour care, that they wouldn't have what they had. And there many resources and organizations were recommended to them, but she decided that she was going to take her life so that savings remained to take care of him. This is the healthcare system in the US. There is no funding for chronic disease. There is no funding for caregiving. There is no funding for supporting patients and families. And we do the best we can, but I don't want anyone to think anymore when they say pain that it's only about what hurts physically. Okay. The number of people who don't want to hear that you've been diagnosed with cancer or a brain tumor or had a massive stroke or whatever, the social isolation, the emotional isolation, okay, all of these are major factors in quality of life. And this is why hospice teams work on an entire picture of pain. Okay. To completely shift the discussion, okay, let's talk about what's going on in Massachusetts, okay, in terms of making our choices and making them clear to people who are going to come and intervene. Right now, so I've worked in hospice in quite a number of states. In some states, if you write a living will or advance directives, those states will honor them. Massachusetts will not. Okay. There's some amazing tools out there where people can write out their wishes and in detail discuss them with their doctors, but in Massachusetts, they will not be honored. Okay. The only thing that is honored in Massachusetts is right now called a MOLST. Okay. A Massachusetts specific document called Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's a document that is regulated, the exact form of it, every single page, what the instructions look like, what color you print it on is regulated. Okay. It is supposed to be astro bright pinks. There's actually a very interesting name for the color. Okay. It's bright, the brightest pink you can imagine. It's supposed to be there so that the EMTs can spot it on your refrigerator. Okay. Right now, it is almost the only acceptable choice for documenting your wishes for end of life care in Massachusetts. Okay. It is a paper system. It's not transferable. It's supposed to go on your refrigerator. EMTs are trained to look on the refrigerator to see if there is a pink piece of paper on it. Okay. It is medical order, so it has to be signed by a physician to be legitimate. So you can't just write your directions on it. It has to be signed by a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA. Okay. And it focuses on specific treatments. It's sometimes not useful. I have a copy of the MULST with me and I have a copy of the PULST. So if anybody's interested in that, we can talk about it. Fortunately, Massachusetts is initiating a better way. Okay. There's a national system being put in place. I think right now, 16 states are part of it. It's called the National Portable Medical Orders for Life Sustaining Treatment, the PULST. Okay. And it's meant to be electronic. So they're not going to have forms for you to make out. Right now, if you want to write a MULST and talk it over with your doctor, you can download the form from the state. You can't do anything with it unless a doctor signs it, but you can download it. In the future, you'll be able to find a PULST, but it's not going to be what you use. Basically, your doctor is going to have in their office the PULSE system online. You'll be able to sign into the PULSE system and see what you've made out with your doctor. Any provider will be able to sign into the PULSE system and find out what you've written. Because right now what happens is if you have a MULST on your refrigerator door, and I've made out 3 MULSTs in the last 3 years, because what happens is you go in for admission to the hospital and they say, do you have your MULST? And you hand it over to them and they never give it back. Okay. And the EMT takes it off your refrigerator, gives it to the ER staff who never give it back. Okay. With the PULSE, when it's done and up, anybody will be able to find any provider, anybody who's got a legitimate sign in. And what will happen is your provider will give you a patient sign in for yours that gives you access only to yours. But providers will have access to anybody's that they're taking care of. Yeah.
We just have a question in the audience, getting the microphone there now.
How about the refrigerator door issue? Because my understanding is that EMTs have to give you care if they, if they don't see something there.
Okay. The way it's being designed is EMTs work on tablets now, the way everybody does, and their tablets are going to have an immediate access to PULSE. So there is some issues that have to be worked out, because if you don't spell your name right and they don't spell your name right and it's not connected, they're not going to find it. That's true. So quite frankly, until they get the system completely troubleshot, I would ask my doctor for a printout of my PULSE to stick on my refrigerator. But they're supposed to be designing ways out of it.
May I add a comment? This is from Patty, just on that point. If you've decided that you don't want life-saving treatment, just kind of across the board, don't call the ambulance, and make sure that your loved ones who show up, that they've agreed to not call the ambulance, because this system is so flawed. So yeah, they are required, but you're not required to call them.
This includes people who come in to sit for an afternoon. I can't tell you how many hospice patients end up in the hospital because somebody came in to give relief to the caregivers and somebody had a bad day and they called the ambulance. And so, yeah.
Another question in the audience.
One here too.
Sorry, when did you say the PULSE is going to start in Massachusetts?
Okay. So the PULSE pilot period started last month. So there's a small number of providers of many different types that are piloting PULSE as of right now. So I think there's 2 hospitals in Massachusetts, quite a number of providers' offices. Good Samaritan Hospice is a pilot hospice that are working with the new system now. Okay, that's delayed from what was originally intended. What is going to happen is those pilot agencies are going to be able to use the Pulse from now on, no matter what. It's even if the pilot period is ended, they will be on Pulsed. And anybody who's made out a Pulse, that will be honored and still in the system and everything. What they will do is sometime next year, they are going to stop the pilot, analyze how well it worked, see what they have to fix, and then go live. They hope right now the hoped for date is the beginning of 2026. This is a state system. We're not buying it. I won't tell you what's happening with the death registration system, which was supposed to go electronic 18 months ago and may go live in April of next year. But those agencies that are able to use the Pulse now, it's a small group, but they're able to use them. If your provider is not part of the pilot, you can't use Pulse until it goes widely alive.
May I follow up with the question? So in our newsletter, we just announced the death registration system is supposed to go online after the November election because it involves town and city clerks. And I heard it at the embalming board meeting. They also
they're saying
said
that they're going to make the current
they have nothing to do with it. They're on the receiving end.
Yes.
But you really think it's going to be much longer? Thank you.
There have been 4 go live dates for the electronic death registration system. And the newest one is November. I think it's 50-50. I think it's more likely to be early in 2025, but I'm prepared to be pleasantly surprised. I'm also prepared because I know Massachusetts finally, early in this year, at the beginning of this year, hired a MOLST to POST coordinator, a professional, to really get the state all together in getting Pulsed up and running without the issues that they saw in the death registration system and that sort of thing. This person is a really talented individual. Priscilla, I think if anybody can get them together to have the Pulsed on time, it will be Priscilla. So I have more hope for the Pulsed actually occurring at the beginning of 2026 than I have for the death registration system anytime soon.
Okay, one moment.
So the MOLST is not the only thing that you're supposed to put on your refrigerator. There's also the file of life, in which you write down all of your prescriptions, all the drugs you take, and you put it in a red envelope, bright red envelope, and it's magnetized. And you're supposed to stick that on your refrigerator as well. However, more and more people I know have stainless steel refrigerators, and you can't stick anything on them. You could tape them, I suppose. But is there an alternative place that first responders are being educated to look if there's nothing on the refrigerator?
I will honestly say that I don't think a lot of first responders even know to look for that on the refrigerator. So what I'd say is that everybody in the house is trained to get that envelope wherever it is to those people's hands. Okay. Because I'd say probably a fair number of people going in don't even know about the red envelope.
I have another question.
Thank you. Just so you know, my understanding right before you gave this presentation on this particular section was there's full code and there's DNR. And my mind's numb.
Okay. So that's one of the better things about Pulsed as well. MOLST has driven me crazy for my entire time in Massachusetts because the front part of the form is I want to be resuscitated Yes or no. I want to be mechanically ventilated. Yes or no. So you could say that you wanted to be resuscitated, but you didn't want to be mechanically ventilated. And those two don't work. Those two answers don't work. If you're not, your heart's not beating and you're not breathing, just trying to play with your heart isn't going to make any oxygen transfer to any tissue anywhere. And those are the first two questions on a MOLST is I want this and I want that. And then on the back, it gets to nutrition and hydration and a variety of things. The front of the PULST. So what will be the first screens in the electronic system? And like I said, I have pictures, I have printouts of both forms with me. But the front screens of the PULST is what level of care do you desire? Full care, symptoms, item specific care, what's called selective care. And then there's a part that you have to fill out what kind of selective things that you want to have or comfort measures. So there's it's instead of asking, do you want this procedure done on you? It asks what level of intervention do you want? And then there's places to be much more specific about it. And I think that's a way better approach than it's much more similar to the things that Massachusetts won't accept, like 5 wishes and the living wills and those sorts of things. It's much more intelligent. It does require that people actually read what you put in those paragraphs. Okay, instead of, they said no CPR. Oh no, there is CPR, but we shouldn't tube them. Okay, none of that makes sense. So we're going to do what we want anyway. So the PULST is going to be a better solution for all of us when it becomes active. I look forward to filling out my PULST at some point. Okay, and every one of these is changeable. Everything is changeable. Okay, and the PULST, if you go on and see your pulse still says such and such, you do have to ask a provider to go in and change it. You can't change it yourself in the system, but all you have to do is make a call to your doctor and say, okay, please change the choices on this. And then they can go ahead and fix it. Okay, I think that's my last slide.